Welcome to another deep dive. This time, we're going right into the heart of online expression and, its boundaries. We're diving into the case of Zoe Sagan over in France.
Ah, yes.
A Twitter account creator whose tweets about Brigitte Macron, the French First Lady,
Right.
landed them in some pretty serious legal hot water. It's already being called a real-life episode of Black Mirror, so...
It is. It's striking how much this case, I think, exposes the fault lines between, what we deem acceptable online versus what crosses over into the criminal. We're really asking, where does free speech end and where does harmful communication begin?
Yeah, such a good question. So let's break it down, get into the specifics. Zoe Sagan was arrested on December 10th.
Right.
Facing charges of cyberbullying and provocation to commit an offense. Authorities are saying that these tweets could have potentially incited others to harass or even harm Brigitte Macron.
This brings up a pretty crucial question about the nature of criminal intent, Can we hold someone accountable for the potential consequences of their words, even if there's no direct evidence of them explicitly advocating for harm?
Yeah.
It's a slippery slope, and one that a lot of legal experts are finding really troubling.
For sure. It feels almost Orwellian, doesn't it?
Yes.
Like we're punishing thought crimes instead of actual actions. And then how do we even start to assess intent in the online world where context is so easily lost?
Yeah.
That's heavy. Isn't that kind of like a slippery slope? Punishing someone for what their words might cause?
It is a tricky area.
It reminds me of, have you ever seen Minority Report?
Of course. It's like, predictive justice.
That's the term. And like you said, Minority Report really shows how scary that can get.
Absolutely.
It's making me think about, how we even figure out what someone meant online.
Right.
Because things get taken out of context so easily. I mean, where's that line between free speech and incitement?
Yeah.
Our source material keeps bringing up this presumption of innocence thing, which on the surface seems pretty basic, right? Innocent until proven guilty.
Oh, it's absolutely fundamental to French law.
But how does that play out in a case like Zoe's?
Well, it means the burden of proof is on the accusation.
So they have to prove that Zoe was intentionally harassing someone, not the other way around.
Precisely.
That makes sense in theory. But I can already see how this could get messy with, online communication where things like sarcasm and jokes can easily be misinterpreted.
Oh, absolutely.
Like imagine trying to prove you were just kidding in court.
Exactly. And that's where, honestly, this case gets really worrying because it's not just about laws. It's about how it could stop people from speaking freely at all.
Oh, totally.
Like if people start censoring themselves because they're scared of getting in trouble, even if they didn't mean anything bad, that's not good for anyone.
Yeah, it's like everyone's walking on eggshells all the time.
That's precisely the challenge. I mean, a sarcastic comment intended for a small group of friends can suddenly, go viral.
Right.
Reaching an audience far beyond its intended scope, the nuance gets lost in that digital echo chamber, and what might have been harmless in one context is suddenly perceived as malicious.
Yeah. And this leads us to the controversial tool that's being used in this case, France's Schiappa law. It was passed back in 2018, and initially it was intended to combat online harassment, particularly for those, who maybe didn't have the resources to defend themselves. But now it's being applied to Brigitte Macron, who is a figure with considerable power and access to legal representation.
Yeah, and that's where the concerns about overreach start to come up. If a law that was designed to protect the vulnerable can then be used to shield powerful individuals from criticism, even if that criticism is legitimate, it sets a dangerous precedent. And it erodes trust in the legal system and raises all sorts of questions about, who these laws are actually designed to serve.
It really makes you wonder if the Schiappa law, in its attempt to protect, might actually be stifling the very essence of free and open discourse.
It's amazing how much influence social media has these days, right? It's not just about sharing cat videos anymore.
You're telling me it's become this huge battleground for ideas and information.
Yeah, it can shape public opinion, it can spark movements, and even sway elections.
It's like what Elon Musk said, we are the media now.
Exactly. And if social media is the media, then who gets to decide what's acceptable to say and what crosses the line?
That makes sense.
The law's wording is quite broad, and this leads to a real lack of clarity around, what exactly constitutes provocation or incitement. So this vagueness leaves it really open to interpretation and potentially to being used for, ideological control, silencing voices under this guise of protecting individuals.
Yeah, for sure. And adding another layer of complexity here, Zoe Sagan claims that their work is infofiction,
Okay.
a blend of fact and fiction aimed at sparking debate.
That's where the legal waters get even murkier. How do you actually assess intent when you're dealing with a genre that, intentionally blurs those lines between reality and fabrication?
Right.
Is this protected artistic expression, or is it a veiled attempt to actually inflict harm?
Yeah. I mean, it's almost impossible to, disentangle those threads without a deep understanding of the creator's intent and the specific context where the work was created and disseminated.
Mm-hmm.
But proving intent, especially in the online world, it's like trying to catch smoke.
And it makes us confront this this really fundamental question. Should we focus on the potential harm that words might cause, or on the demonstrable harm they've actually caused? The answer to that question is going to have far-reaching implications for the future of free speech in the digital age.
Yeah, I mean, it feels like every step we take in this deep dive leads to even more profound questions about the nature of expression and responsibility and justice in the digital age. This case isn't just about Zoe Sagan's tweets, it's about the soul of online discourse.
We're really at a crossroads, trying to navigate a landscape where the rules are constantly shifting.
Yeah.
The boundaries between freedom and harm are increasingly blurred. And, it's a conversation that really demands all of our attention. This case is drawing comparisons to other really controversial battles over free speech, especially those that have gone to the European Court of Human Rights.
Yeah, the ECHR keeps coming up. Can you remind us what it is and why it matters in a case like this?
Yeah, think of it as the guardian of fundamental rights across all of Europe.
Okay.
So it makes sure member countries, including France, stick to the principles of the European Convention on Human Rights.
Which includes freedom of expression.
Yeah.
So even though this case is playing out in the French courts,
Yeah.
The ECHR has the power to step in and say, hold on, France.
Yeah.
What you're doing might be violating the human rights agreements we've all signed.
Right. So Zoe Sagan's case could have effects beyond France's borders.
Absolutely.
But how does the ECHR balance free speech against the need to protect individuals from harm? Where do they draw the line?
Well, there was this landmark case involving a French politician who was convicted for inciting hatred against Muslims.
Okay.
His statements caused a huge public outcry, and it eventually went to the ECHR.
Right.
And what's really interesting is that ECHR didn't just focus on the politician's words, in isolation. Mm-hmm. They looked at the whole context. Who was he addressing? What was the political climate?
Right.
The potential impact on the targeted group.
So it's not just what was said, but the whole situation and the potential consequences.
Exactly. They take a very holistic view, considering both the intent and the impact. So did the ECHR end up upholding the French court's decision.
They did. The ECHR acknowledged that freedom of expression is obviously a cornerstone of a democratic society, but it's not absolute,
Right.
There are limits, especially when speech incites hatred or violence, leading to real-world harm. So they determined that, in this case, the politician's speech crossed the line.
It seems like such a delicate balancing act. And, this brings us back to the complexity of Zoe Sagan's case. We're not talking about fiery speeches. We're talking about tweets.
Yeah.
These short bursts of text that can be so ambiguous. How do we apply those same principles of context and intent to the world of social media where everything moves so fast?
Yeah, it's the $1 million question. I mean,
Yeah.
social media just adds a whole new dimension to this debate.
Yeah.
A tweet that's, meant as a joke within a small online community can suddenly, explode,
Right.
reaching this massive audience that might misinterpret it.
Right.
We've all seen how quickly things get out of control online.
Yeah.
A seemingly harmless comment suddenly turns into this weapon and is used to cause harm. And that raises so many legal and ethical challenges.
It really is like trying to apply the rules of a board game to a video game.
Mm-hmm.
The speed, the reach, the anonymity, the context getting stripped away. It creates a whole different playing field. So how do we even begin to establish accountability in a space that's, so fluid?
One thing we haven't really talked about yet is the role of France's Court of Cassation.
Okay.
While the ECHR deals with broad human rights across Europe, the Court of Cassation is France's highest court of appeal.
Okay.
Their job is to make sure that the lower courts are applying French law correctly and fairly.
So in Zoe Sagan's case, they'd be tasked with deciding whether the lower court that convicted them correctly interpreted and applied the Schiappa law.
Right. Looking at the specifics, the evidence, and making sure that the legal process was actually followed correctly.
So their decision could really impact how the Schiappa law is used in future cases involving online speech.
Oh, absolutely. It could set a precedent for how France decides to balance freedom of expression with protecting individuals from online harm. The stakes are pretty high.
Yeah. The French legal system seems to be at a real crossroads here.
It is.
Trying to apply these old laws to this new digital landscape.
Yeah.
It's a challenge courts all around the world are facing. Mm-hmm. So what happens next? What are we watching for as this all unfolds?
Well, a few key things. First, we'll see how the Court of Cassation rules on Zoe Sagan's appeal.
Right.
If they uphold the lower court's decision, that could embolden the government to maybe take a more aggressive approach with online speech that it deems harmful.
Right.
But on the other hand, if they overturn the conviction, that could mean they're going to be more cautious, prioritizing free expression, even when there are potential harms online.
It's almost like this is a test for the limits of free speech in the digital age. Not just in France,
yeah,
but potentially across Europe. It's a big moment.
Absolutely. And beyond the law, we'll also see how this case shapes the conversation about online speech in general. Will it raise awareness about the potential for harm?
Right.
Will it lead to more nuanced discussions about online behavior?
Yeah.
Or will it actually create a climate of fear and self-censorship where people are, afraid to express themselves because of potential legal consequences?
Yeah, such a good point. It's a reminder that this isn't just a legal issue. It's a social and cultural one.
Right.
It touches on our values and how we define and protect freedom of expression.
Yeah.
And that brings us to the political aspects of all this, which are just as complex. We spent a lot of time in the legal side of things.
Yeah.
But let's shift gears a little bit and look at the political currents that are swirling around all this.
Right.
Our sources point to this 2016 statement by Manuel Valls. He was the Prime Minister of France at the time. And he said, and this is a quote, "To explain is to excuse."
Whoa, that's something.
So this statement, it sent shockwaves through intellectual and academic circles. It basically says that any attempt to understand the motives behind something, even something terrible, is like you're condoning it.
Yeah, it shuts down any possibility of, having a nuanced conversation or any real critical analysis.
Yeah, it's like saying you can't study a virus without wanting to spread it.
Exactly.
It's a very dangerous equivalency to make. And our sources say this, along with the government's response to the Gilets Jaunes movement, the yellow vests.
Yeah.
It's fueled concerns about a growing intolerance of dissent in France.
Right.
Initially, it was over, economic grievances, but quickly evolved into a broader critique of Macron's policies and his leadership. The government responded with a really heavy-handed police presence, lots of tear gas, procedural bans on protests. It was criticized pretty widely as being a violation of the right to peaceful assembly.
Right, and I think for those who saw Valls' statement as a sign of things to come,
a more authoritarian way of governing where you just silence dissenting voices instead of, engaging with them.
Yeah.
This seemed to just confirm their fears.
Yeah. But our sources also point to Macron's supporters, and they argue that these measures were necessary to keep things in order and protect these public figures from harassment and threats.
They would argue, freedom of expression, it has its limits like all rights do, and that those limits need to be enforced when speech incites violence or puts the public in danger or infringes on other people's rights.
Yeah.
They often bring up the real dangers of online hate speech and argue that it's the government's job to step in and protect citizens from that kind of harmful content.
Right, so they're basically saying freedom without responsibility is just chaos.
Yeah.
And that the government needs to step in when that freedom is being used to cause harm.
Right. It's a complex argument and one that resonates with a lot of people, especially those who are, concerned about how toxic things have become online. But how do you reconcile that with the concerns about censorship and suppression of dissent?
It really is the central question, isn't it?
Yeah.
How do we balance protecting individuals from harm with protecting that right to free expression? It's not just a challenge for democracies. I mean, this is something everyone's struggling with, and there's really no easy answer.
It seems like we keep coming back to this idea of context.
Yeah.
What's considered okay in one situation
Right.
could be super harmful or offensive in another.
It's true.
And that makes it so tough to create, laws and policies that can actually handle the complexities of online communication.
Right.
But one thing's for sure, this case has really kicked off a debate that isn't going away anytime soon.
Absolutely. The Zoe Sagan case has exposed these tensions and anxieties that we have about the future of free speech in the digital world. It's making us ask some uncomfortable questions about, what is truth? The limits of tolerance, the role of government in all of this. And these are tough conversations, but we need to have them.
Yeah, the way we answer those questions will shape, not just laws, but our whole digital society.
It really will.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into this case, we encourage you, the listener, to keep exploring these issues.
Yeah.
To have those thoughtful conversations and be a part of shaping a digital world where we can have free expression, but responsibly.
Right.
It's a challenge that needs all of us, our wisdom and courage. And the stakes are high, not just for Zoe Sagan, but for all of us who value that right to speak freely and have those open and honest conversations. So thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We'll see you next time.